Thanks, Andre and Piotr, for inviting me and organizing this. So I'm gonna just present a bunch of ideas about how important mobile is and how to use it. And thank you all for tuning in. I also want to just preface this by saying, I'm living in Los Angeles. I haven't been to Poland for 4. I don't know fundraising is different in every country, in every culture. So I'm keeping that in mind, and I'm gonna show some things that are working in the U.S. and the U.K. and a few other countries. But I'm not an expert in how things work in Poland. I hope in time for the next webinar to have spoken with some of you by phone and have a better idea of what's possible to do in Poland, how Polish people respond to certain kind of fundraising, et cetera. But it's always good to see what people are doing elsewhere and to figure out how you can adapt that for your reality, whether it's in Poland or Nigeria or Canada, whatever. So let's get started here. Um, what we'll discuss roughly is, why mobile can be part of a movement, what's working in the US and the UK. Those are two countries I've been working in most recently. What could work in Poland, and of course, your questions. And in fact, Andre was saying you can send your questions in, and I will try and respond to them on the next webinar. If it's okay with Andres, I can probably respond by email to your questions in the next week or so, assuming the questions are not too complex. So, you know the Polish reality better than I did, but I did a little Google research and got a few numbers about Poland. There are something like 15 million regular Facebook users in Poland. This is some data on what people do on their various devices in terms of checking their email, visiting a social network, using a search engine, looking for product information, listening to music. And you'll see mobile, if the mobile is the smartphone is the top number in each of those 5 categories. So it's running 40 to 50% of use in Poland is on smartphone. The second line is computer. So it's still the majority of use in some cases in Poland is on some kind of a desktop or laptop, but everything is moving toward mobile, as you probably know from your own experience. Most of us everywhere in the world now are using our mobiles for most things. And if we're watching TV, we've got our mobile in our hand. If we're, standing in line in the supermarket, we've got our mobile in our hand. If we're waiting for our kids, we've got our mobile in our hands, etc. These are some numbers from the US, but I'm guessing the numbers are not radically different in Poland. Digital media use, 6 hours a day. And in this chart, the top bar, the green, is use on mobile, and the gray is desktop or laptop, and the blue at the bottom is tablet. I mean tablets. So people are spending more and more time on their phones, and this obviously there's a lot of problems with this. And if you've got kids, you may be concerned about this, but this is the reality. This again, I couldn't find this data for Poland, although I'm sure I could dig a little deeper. This was total 25 top mobile apps by unique visitors. This is US data from a few years ago, although it hasn't changed that much. I mean, Facebook Messenger, YouTube, Google Maps, Google Search, Google Play, Gmail. In other words, a few apps dominate our use of mobile. And in fact, this can be a problem for NGOs because what most people are doing on their phone is inside an app. It's inside Facebook, it's inside Instagram, it's inside a Google app, it's inside Google Play. So that's the challenge. We're facing a lot of heavy competition. And I thought just, without showing a whole lot of slides, this was sort of interesting. This was saying that social media is driving product discovery and purchases, meaning when people are thinking about buying something, they go to social media, and social media, as you know, is mostly on your phone. I mean, think about Facebook or Instagram. You're using that almost entirely on your phone, or most people are. And if you think of product discovery, of course, they're talking about commercial products, buying a new set of speakers, buying some clothes, whatever. But our NGOs are kind of product in the sense we want people to be finding out about us in the ways they like to find out about things. And in most cases, that's by looking on their phone, looking at their email, looking at their text messages, searching on Google, et cetera. So, we want to think about how do we make our organizations and our causes accessible on mobile. Um, this is a funny photo that was taken a few years ago, I think in London. There was a demonstration, and often people complain about demonstrations. Oh, you're blocking traffic. It took me longer to get home from work. I didn't like walking through the crowd, blah, blah, blah. So, this was, I love this poster. Sorry for the inconvenience. We're trying to change the world. And I think from what Andres just told me about what you all are doing, you're trying to do that, changing Poland and changing the world and changing the attitudes of people in Poland. So, in all this work that I'm going to talk about on mobile, you want to keep in mind what are your bigger objectives. Um, so, I always think of it as part of a movement. I mean, I've mostly worked almost entirely for social causes that, Americans would call progressive. Obviously, there's different words in different countries. I've worked a lot on civil rights issues, LGBT issues, human rights issues. I've worked for Amnesty, Human Rights Campaign, which is the biggest LGBT movement in the United States, UNICEF, CARE, Save the Children, a whole range of organizations working both in the United States and around the world. But I think we're always trying to build a movement to get more and more people to support our causes and to come and see things our way. The sun is moving, so I'm going to move here too. I like this quote from Seth Godin, who was an early internet marketer who sold his company to Yahoo for what was a lot of money at the time, and has since become a marketing guru. If you don't know him, check out SethGodin.com. He says a movement is thrilling. It's the work of many people, all connected, all seeking something better. So if you think of what we're doing, in our NGOs and in our causes as building a movement, and this is for Americans. This is one of the most famous movements, the Civil Rights Movement, and this is Martin Luther King at the 1963 March on Washington. Obviously brought together hundreds of thousands of people and kind of changed the consciousness in the U.S. This is more recent. This was the march after President Trump was elected. You see everybody wearing their pink pussy hats. This was in Bratislava last year, when a huge number of people came out on the street to try and change the politics of their country. So, this happens everywhere. And how do you get all these people to come out in the street in Bratislava, come out in the street in Washington, come out in the street in Warsaw, Krakow, whatever you're doing? Talk a little bit about that. So without spending a lot of time on a movement, one of my colleagues at Open and a guy who was the strategy director for Bernie Sanders did a recent presentation, and I've stolen a couple of slides. This is one they did on anatomy of a movement. So what's in a movement? It's a vision to believe in, a believable plan to deliver that vision, right? I mean, people want to join you if they think there's some chance of success. Values that people can subscribe to, useful things to do. In other words, if you want people to join the movement, you have to give them something to do. One we love to do is to have them give money, but often there are other things they could do as well. And typically movements are stronger when they have some kind of charismatic, leadership or leaders. It doesn't always have to be a white guy like me, but people do follow leaders, and leaders can give direction to a movement. So we could spend the whole week talking about that. Let me just get more into mobile now. First, a pretty savvy guy, a venture capitalist, wrote "Mobile is Eating the World" a few years ago. He was just saying that the way we access the internet has gone from desktop and laptop to mobile phone, and that's continuing. In Poland and everywhere in the world. I mean, people are spending, the phones are better, they're more powerful, they've got bigger screens. And, whether they're a high-end Samsung or iPhone or a low-end, phone that you can buy for $30 in India, people want to do everything on their phone. This is a picture, you guys may recognize this, 2005, when one of the popes was, a new pope was inaugurated. Everybody in top picture is just standing there looking to see if they can get a glimpse of the pope. 2013 with the next pope, everybody's got their phone out. And I think if you did that picture in 2016, everybody would be turned around holding up their phones hoping to get a selfie of themselves and the new pope. So it's our behavior has changed because we've got a phone with us all the time, and also because we want to be part of the scene. There was a famous picture of Hillary Clinton during the 2016 US campaign, and she's at a rally, and her followers have turned their backs on her so that they can hold up their phones and get a picture of themselves in the foreground and Hillary in the background. Whereas a few years before, you would have focused your phone on on Hillary alone, not expecting to have your selfie, yourself included in there. So, increasingly mobile is digital. Digital is mobile. Most digital is being consumed on mobile, and most digital is being created on mobile. If you're on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, imagine the volume of content that users are creating every day. It's sort of unbelievable. So it's, not only are people consuming media on mobile, but they're actually creating media on mobile because they're taking pictures constantly and feeding that into the content universe. And again, your NGO wants to be part of that conversation. You're competing against a lot of other stuff, and you're competing against a lot of big interests. But one of our issues is how to get our NGOs onto people's phones, how to make us you're never going to be Facebook, you're never going to be Instagram, you're never going to be Google Maps or Google Search, right? Those are always going to dominate. But how can you make your issues something that shows up on people's phones and something that people want to engage with on their phones? There's a funny picture I came across of, with the idea of, people take their phones everywhere. And we did some advertising in the UK a couple of years ago for some NGOs, and one of the most successful places to put the ads was on the back of the door in a toilet stall, because people go into the toilet stall, they close the door, they sit on the toilet, and they get out their phones. And this was a poster on the back of the toilet stall door, and these were very nice, clean English toilet stalls, and we got a really high response per poster there because people were sitting there. They were we would call it captive audience. They couldn't go anywhere. They had their phones. They had a signal, and they decided to give, £3 to UNICEF. So I don't know if you're going to be able to do that, but it's interesting to think about how, our phones are with us. I've got a 22-year-old daughter, and when she was in high school, sometimes I would come up to her bedroom when she was asleep and, to try and find something, and she'd be laying there with her hand outstretched and her phone 30 centimeters from her hand. I used to joke with her, "Are you expecting President Obama will be calling you tonight? So you need to have your phone nearby." But she just, she lived with her phone. One feature on phone is SMS, short messaging service. And that's ubiquitous on phones, whether you've got a high-end phone that costs €1,000 or a low-end phone that costs €50, everybody gets SMS. So, this number is kind of astonishing. 7.4 billion people in the world, 6 billion of them have SMS. It's amazing. And obviously, everybody in Poland who's got a phone, whether it's a flip phone or an iPhone 10, or a brand new Samsung, has got SMS. So if that's what people are using, that's one of the communication channels we need to figure out how to use, because that's what people are using. And I'll talk some about that. So, why mobile? Again, not to repeat the obvious, but the phone's always on. We've all got one close. We've all got one. Every phone can send SMS. A text message can be sent in seconds, and response is really easy also. And everything in fundraising is making a great offer and then making it really easy for people to respond. right? I mean, the offer has got to be good. You got to make people want to either give you money or come to an event or sign a petition, and then you got to make it easy for them. And that's even more important on a phone because A, people are very distracted when they're using phones, and B, a phone is a very small screen, and you're inputting with your fingers. So if on a phone you had a long form where you have to fill in 10 or 20 fields, the percentage of people who actually fill it out is very low. We call that the conversion rate. So you want to make every kind of response simple on a phone. I'm going to skip a few of these. This is I'm going to try and show as many examples as I can. And again, these are mostly US or UK examples. Polish examples are going to be different, but I think the principles are the same, even if some of the donation systems are different, and an approach that works in the US might not work in Poland. You need a Polish approach, right? You got to be thinking about how to Poles, or how specifically do the part of the Polish audience that I'm addressing, how will they respond to these things? So, this was a typical fundraising appeal. Nancy Pelosi is, the Speaker of the House of Representatives in Congress. And you see, this is a screen grab on the left, really simple, easy to read on a phone. I mean, that's, and she had already asked me to give donations, and she was using a technology that saved my credit card information. So she could just send me links, chip in $1, $35, $50, $100, and I would click on that and it would say, thank you, we're charging $50 to your credit card ending in 1234. Now, in the US, credit cards are how most people give online. I know that the use of credit cards may be somewhat less in Poland, and for the next webinar, I promise I will become more versed in what payment methods people are using in Poland and what's possible. Okay. So that when I click forward, these are the screens that I saw, and in this case, they noticed that I have Apple Pay, and they offered me to pay in Apple Pay, which is, if you have an iPhone that's enabled for Apple Pay, it's the most frictionless way of paying. You just click on one of these. You just click on one of these buttons, and the donation is done. So they're always looking for what's the simplest way to enable somebody to make a donation. Let's see. Let me just show a few ways people have using mobile to recruit donors in the UK and the US. Again, some of these examples may make sense in Poland, some may not, and we'll talk more about that at the December webinar. And if you send me your questions, I will try and answer them in the next week. If you send them, in the next day or two, I will try and answer them in the next week or two. And maybe, if this is okay with Andre, he can put them all together and send them out as an email or post them on a website, assuming there are some questions that are interesting to a variety of people. This is I have a company in the US called Open America, which is a sister company to the biggest British fundraising agency called Open. And these are some ads that they did starting about 5 years ago in the UK. And these ads were taken on the London subway, the tube, the metro. And at the time, there was very little advertising on the tube, and the space was very cheap. I mean, it was very cheap to put ads in the metro. And, on the metro, you've got this great kind of captive audience, right? You're in the metro, you're going to work, or you're going to a football game, or whatever you're doing. You can't do very much. You're sitting there with your mobile. I mean, the mobile works in some stations and doesn't work in other stations, but you're sitting there with it. So Open put up these ads for Christian Aid, which is an international development organization, a little bit like UNICEF or Save the Children. Malaria kills a child every 45 seconds. Text £3, send a net. £3 is like $5 US. Save a life. So, the problem was very easily stated. Malaria kills a child every 45 seconds. And obviously most people felt that was outrageous, terrible thing. And the solution, send £3, send a net, save a life. So there was a really easy solution at a very low cost. I mean, most people in the UK could afford to send £3. And obviously this was based on being able to send a text message that would trigger a gift billed on people's mobile bill. Anybody know, can you do that in Poland? Then that triggered a whole series of other ads. This was one for a breast cancer group. You know the 5 signs of breast cancer, right? Yes, 5. Text look to 84424 for your free touch look check guide. This was a guide to giving yourself a breast self-exam. And people would send this, then they would get a phone call saying, thank you so much for your interest in this. Let me get your postal address so I can send you this guide. And would you care to make a donation to help us fight against breast cancer and get this information in the hands of millions of English women? So it was a kind of a lead generator that turned into a fundraiser. And they did this across issues. This is for Diabetes UK. This was a campaign for Friends of the Earth. In so many parts of the world, the bees are dying off, and their essential role is being destroyed because there's so much pesticides and other poison in the atmosphere. So, this was a campaign that was run across channels, and the call to action was text B to 70123 to give £3 to the bee cause. We'll send you some bee-friendly flower seeds. So they actually would send you an envelope of seeds that you could plant in your garden. And, this appealed especially to a certain group of suburban Londoners, probably, families with young kids who had space to have a garden, maybe got their kids to help them plant the seeds. You could see how you could target a certain demographic with this. And then, sow your seeds and save the bees. And this, they first tried this on the subway. I'm gonna skip over a couple of these. They tried it on the subway. That looks kind of like this. Then they tried it in the tube stations, in the subway stations, and they dressed some people up as bees just to create more buzz about this campaign. They had face-to-face canvassers on the street, dressed like bees, or giving out these seed packets, and they tested in one channel and then rolled out in other channels to see if they could get volume. And eventually they went on television. And I don't know if any NGOs are doing television campaigns. I mean, there's issues of censorship and control. There's issues of cost. But if you have a campaign that is working in less expensive channels, television is still the biggest. I mean, I guess television and Facebook are still the biggest channels for reaching the largest number of people. Obviously, you've got to have an issue that appeals to a large number of people. And, there's something about the bees and the environment that's obviously very attractive. And also, obviously, this is going to depend on the cost of the media, right? We tried some of these ads in the New York subway, and we got proportionally a similar response to what they got in the UK, but the cost of the media was much higher. So it didn't really work out financially. The other nice thing about doing things that, reach a big audience is you build visibility for your cause. And so then if you're fundraising in other kind of channels, you can have more success. I wish I were in a room with all of you and I could be getting some sort of live visual feedback, and you're all scratching your head saying, this doesn't make very much sense, or this is useful, or what about this or that. Anyway, I can't see you, but I hope to see you sometime this year. So, and do come to the conference in October in Bratislava. I'll be there and we can hang out and we can talk more specifically about things. So what makes this kind of mobile response media work? A couple of things. One is the channels you're in, and one is the creative. And again, I know this might be thinking bigger than you're thinking right now. And in the next section, I'm going to talk about some things that are maybe easier to do now than launch a campaign that involves, producing this kind of creative and getting in these relatively expensive channels. I don't know what advertising costs in the Warsaw subway or Warsaw buses or Polish trains, and whether that would even be effective, and whether you can even get, for instance, controversial content on. I mean, we have a problem in the US, the New York subway, which is the biggest subway in terms of people on, will not take anything they consider controversial. And they won't take any kind of political advertising. And, that's just been a problem. I mean, years ago with some other people, we went to court to try and change that. And the court said, no, the people who run the subway have the right to accept or reject any creative they want. So you can sell soap and shampoo, but it's hard to sell. Sometimes it's hard to sell political issues or causes in public channels like the subway. Um, what's working for instance, on these subway ads, and I think this is also true of television, is what we call dwell time. People need to have enough time to absorb your message. And dwell meaning standing there, sitting there time. So the subway has been ideal because people are sitting there. I think average people are on for 15 or 20 minutes in a morning or afternoon commute. Uh, Advertising on TV can be tougher because people are multitasking. You're only buying you're buying, 15, 30 seconds. And, people just don't have enough time to get the message unless you show it to them over and over again. Secondly, obviously, you've got to have a lot of traffic, right? Raising money from, maybe I should have started bigger. Obviously, there's a lot of ways of raising money. You can raise money from foundations. You can raise money from corporations. You can raise money sometimes from governments. You can raise money from foundations. You can raise money from rich people, right? And if you can find the rich people, that's the easiest way to raise money because you can go and ask them for, 10,000 euros or 100,000 euros, or, if it's Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, you can ask them for 20 million euros. Well, what we're talking about in this session is, raising small amounts of money from relatively large number of people. And the beauty of that to me is, one, you're not depending on a few rich people or foundations or corporations. And also when people if they give you, 10 euros or 20 euros, they're not only giving you the money, they're saying, I support your cause. And so fundraising is it's not just fundraising, it's raising support, and it's convincing people that what you're doing is worth their time and their money, even if the gift itself is relatively small. Obviously it can be a lot easier to raise 5,000 euros or 10,000 euros from a rich person, if you can find that rich person for your cause, than it is to raise, 1,000 gifts of 5 euros. Right. It's more work, but it means 1,000 people have said, I support what you're doing. And that you can leverage into, political support and et cetera, in a way you can't leverage one person giving you 5,000 or 50,000 or whatever you can get. You have to find the audience, right? You have to be sending your message, whether it's an email, a text message, an ad in the metro, an ad on TV. You've got to be able to find the people who will resonate with your message. And I know from the little that Andres told me, if you're working on an issue like LGBT rights or immigrant rights or civil liberties, it can be hard to find a big audience. And you may also be very limited in what channels will allow you to post your messages. So we're going to talk in a minute more about email and text messages where you don't really have an issue of censorship or of somebody preventing you from promoting your cause. This was just a cute picture. This is Queen Elizabeth getting off the subway in front of one of our posters. Now, I believe this picture was posed. I don't think she normally takes the subway, but it's good that she's down in there with the people. So, just to switch gears a little bit, fundraising is about coming up with a list of people who will or may respond to your issue and give you money or some other kind of support. And then it's sending them convincing messages that motivate them to do it. And it's about frequency. It's about sending them a lot of messages. And I think often we worry, oh, we're sending too many messages, and we all think we get too many messages, which we do. When I get up in the morning and, look at my phone, I've got hundreds of emails. And that's partly my fault because I subscribe to a lot of email lists. But so they're all competing for my attention. But in test after test after test, we found that sending more messages raises more money. And people don't really blame your organization usually for sending too many messages. They feel like they get too many messages, but if you say, do you get too many messages from organization A? If they like organization A, they say, no, I think organization A sends me about the right number of messages. We did this test. I worked for a number of years for Amnesty USA. I mean, they were one of my biggest clients. And we did a lot of focus groups with them where we would assemble a group of 10 or 15 either donors or advocacy supporters and, ask them questions. And we were watching from behind a one-way mirror, what's called a focus group setup. And, if you say, do you get too much email? Everybody said, yeah, I get way too much email. And then if you said, do you get too much email from Amnesty International? They would say, no, I think Amnesty, they're really good about this. They send me about the right number of messages. And then if you said, how many messages a week or a month do you think Amnesty sends you? They had no idea. And we knew who each of these people in the focus group was, so we knew exactly how many messages they'd gotten in the last week, the last month, the last year. And the donors dramatically underestimated how many they'd gotten. They thought, oh, I think I get 2 or 3 a month, and we knew they were getting 2 or 3 a week. But so you can't necessarily, if people like you, they will accept a lot of messages. So here's this. I just want to show a couple of techniques for building lists. I mean, this is you all know this guy probably, Bernie Sanders. I mean, in the U.S., the political campaigns tend to be the first to figure out new ways of getting donors online. And Bernie Sanders raised, I think, totally about $300 million online with an average gift of like $42 or something. So. But before you can raise money by sending people emails, you've got to get their email address and their permission to send them emails. So this was a typical, if you went to BernieSanders.org or you searched for Bernie Sanders on Google, you would see a page like this. And it would be one of Bernie's, bold statements about issues. So this was one: nobody who works 40 hours a week should be living in poverty. It's a pretty simple statement. Anybody who supports Bernie Sanders probably agrees with it. And all they asked you to fill out was, your email address, your postal code, so they would know where you lived and what congressional district. And you clicked, I agree. And you joined Bernie Sanders' list. And, they built that list into millions of people using web pages like this. I mean, they kept it really simple. They stripped out any information they didn't absolutely need. And then later they would try and get more information. They would try and get your postal address so they could send you mail. They would try and get your mobile phone number so they could call you or text you. But they started by, and Obama had done this in 2008. And since then, really all the candidates and most of the NGOs have kind of copied this technique because it works really well. Here's another, these are Facebook ads. These are two. Color of Change is sort of the leading, Black activist group in the U.S. And they do a lot of Facebook advertising. These are obviously paid ads, right? Because you can't get something like this on Facebook for free. And here's another sort of progressive social justice organization called Real Justice. They're trying to take hot issues. This was after Trump had said something racist, so they know that their audience are not fans of President Trump. And they were saying, tell Democrats, boycott Trump's State of the Union, which is the annual speech that the president gives to the U.S. Congress in January. I mean, this was never going to happen, but they thought this would be a great way to get people to sign their list. So you have a small amount of copy, you have a photo, in this case, kind of annotated, and then you have a sign up. So you click through the sign up and they ask you for your first name, your last name, your email address, your mobile number. And, and then you click a link saying sign up, and then they start sending you fundraising appeals and other information. And, these groups are always just looking for what are different ways to build their list, to get email addresses and or mobile numbers. The beauty with, email obviously is very simple to send. It's very cheap to send. The problem is, the typical open rate. In other words, if you send emails to 100 people, and again, your numbers might vary, but in the US, if you send email to 100 people, about 20 of those people will actually open the email. The other 80%, they don't open it. They put it in a spam folder. They just don't pay attention. Whereas text messages, like 95% of text messages are read. I mean, they're wanting to come in mixed with the messages from your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever. Very personal stuff that you want. So you see those messages, even if they're coming from, an activist group that you're working with, or you care about. So the whole principle is, collect supporter data, ask for money, and repeat. And if you're trying to raise money on mobile or with digital, I cannot stress how important it is to repeat. I mean, don't be shy. Don't worry about asking too much. I mean, if you start getting, dozens of emails from people saying, stop, 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 you're sending me too many emails. And if your best supporters start complaining that you're overdoing it, you might want to reconsider it. But more is better. I mean, the issue typically is just with a small staff, it's just hard to generate that creative. It's hard to write those emails and maybe come up with a photo or something. So that can be tricky. But fundraising is about building as large a list of prospective supporters as you can and asking them over and over and over again. I mean, it's really simple, but I'm sorry, the light is moving around my house, so I'm moving myself a little bit. So, don't be afraid to ask. I mean, asking is what it's about, and asking over and over and over again. And, you have to figure out, obviously, what's the right frequency for you. But, if you've ever raised money face to face from people, it's about asking people. It's about asking, and someone says, well, I like what you're doing, but I'm not ready to give right now. And you say, well, can I call you back in a month? Or can I come visit you again in a couple of months? So it's repetition. So moving right along, the other place to find donors and supporters is on Facebook. And I'm just going to show a couple of campaigns. One campaign for an LGBT group in the UK, and one for one of my clients in the US, the Humane Society, which is an animal welfare group. So, any of you who have worked on AIDS issues or LGBT issues probably know this, the red ribbon, which was a symbol of, the fight against HIV and AIDS. So this was a campaign that was started by a group in the UK called the Terence Higgins Trust, which is a big AIDS charity and activist group in the UK. So they use the symbol that everybody recognized, wear it, and they actually offered to send you a ribbon that you could put on your lapel. And the nice thing is people will sometimes do things if you're giving them a free gift, and a ribbon is very inexpensive to produce, and it's very inexpensive to mail. And it's also enabling your supporters to brand, to brand themselves with your logo. So you're building visibility for your organization when people wear this ribbon or wear this button or this badge or T-shirt. So wear it for someone living with HIV, for someone lost to it, for people you know and people you don't. Not out of charity, but in solidarity. So in this case, you texted the word ribbon to 70123 to donate £1. So a pound is like, $1.25 US. It's not very much money. This was really just to get people to start donating, and they would send you a free ribbon. They took ads. This was a much more complicated program, but I'm just going to show you the basic thing. They decided that their target audience, which was, gay men 30 plus, would like a tote bag. This is a very common premium, freebie gift at least in the US. These tote bags, they're about this big. You can put your groceries in them, or your laundry, or your books, or whatever, and people wear them. And they were appealing to a certain demographic that they thought would respond, which was, I'd say, gay men 30 plus. Be proud, be sexy, be safe. So it had the bag had a message. It had the brand of Terence Higgins Trust, and they basically you clicked through this ad and you gave your phone number, and then they called you, or they had an agency call you and say, thanks so much. We want to send you your bag. What's your postal address so we can mail you the bag? And would you like to become a regular monthly supporter of the Terence Higgins Trust? They got, in the first round, they got 9,000 people offered their phone numbers, and they spent about $5 US per response. They converted about 18% of them to monthly giving. Now in the UK, monthly giving is mostly what they call direct debit, where you provide your bank account number and your bank account is billed every month for the gift to the Terrence Higgins Trust. They spent about $130 US to get a donor. Now this is a very reasonable price to pay in the US. Now that might not be a reasonable price at all to pay in Poland, and you may not have the money to finance something like this. And they got 600 new monthly givers in the first round. They repeated this, and it's been this kind of Facebook advertising. In addition to creating the visibility and building a list, it's also been able to help them build a list of monthly donors who give every month automatically, and those kind of people can provide thousands of dollars or pounds over the next 5 years. This is something completely different. These were ads, Facebook ads, that the Humane Society of the United States, which is one of the biggest animal welfare groups in the US, is doing. And we were testing, in the US we call these premiums. If you make a gift, you get something free. And this is a way of driving response. Obviously, it's also, it means you have to invest. You've got to actually produce the premium, and then you've got to ship the premium. So that involves the kind of cost of, creating an address label, putting the thing in an envelope or a package, putting on postage. So it's an upfront investment. And these were a series of ads. The beautiful thing about Facebook, especially if you can find either a volunteer or a professional who can help you with this, is you can try lots of different variations and try and figure out which one works best. I mean, is this dog more appealing, or is this cat more appealing? Is a T-shirt a better premium, or a tote bag? And again, this is also going to depend on who the audience is, right? I mean, the Humane Society's even tried separate advertising for dog lovers and for cat lovers. So if you click through on this ad, get your free Humane Society of the US tote bag, celebrate animals and confront cruelty. So you put in your first name, last name, email, postal code, and your mobile phone number. Then they called you and said, thank you so much for supporting Humane Society. Let me get your postal address so we can mail you this bag. And would you care to become a regular monthly donor to the Humane Society on your credit card? Again, in the US, people use credit cards. If people said, oh, I don't think I'm ready to be a monthly donor, they would say, well, would you like to give a single gift of $20 or $15? And if they said, oh, I don't think I can give right now, the telephone caller would say, look, thanks so much. We're getting your tote bag in the mail really soon, and we're so glad you're supporting the work of the Humane Society in helping animals. We tried, the Humane Society is a big organization with lots of different efforts. So this was, Humane Society promotes vegetarianism and veganism, and they have a program called Meatless Monday, where they try and get people who normally eat meat to at least do one day a week meatless. They call it Meatless Monday. So we tested Meatless Monday, where we put up recipes for very good looking, vegetarian burgers, and to see whether that would be, and the offer was a recipe book of Meatless Monday recipes. And this is what the response page looked like. And then, they also tested a book about pet behavior, how to train your dog or cat to do what you want or whatever. And this was also a test between, does a dog picture work better than a cat picture? Again, this might be more details than you want to know. And I don't believe any of you are working on animal issues, but maybe I'm wrong. But this was, it just shows the range of creativity you can try. And then, using Facebook's sophisticated testing tools, you can figure out which one works better, or which kind of advertising and which kind of offer gets more people to join or sign a petition or whatever you're asking people to do. So these are some text messages I've recently gotten. I worked for a long time. One of my clients was the Human Rights Campaign, which is the biggest LGBT sort of activist lobby in the US. And they've got about 350,000 people on their text messaging database. And they send out a whole range of stuff. Like you can see the one on the left is SCOTUS refers to the Supreme Court of the United States. And, the Supreme Court in the US has played a pretty important role in gay rights. It was the court that finally said gay marriage has to be legal in all the US states. This cake shop case was a case about a baker or someone who ran a bakery who refused to make a wedding cake for a gay couple. Anyway, this is the kind of, so Human Rights Campaign, people call it HRC, sends out a whole range of text messages trying to get people to either take action, like sign a petition. Sometimes they send out a text message, and if you respond to it, they have a tool that automatically connects you with the office of your member of Congress. I mean, this is a very peculiar American thing. I don't think anywhere in Europe would people do this, but it certainly engages you, right? You get a text message, you click on a link, and a few minutes later, somebody's answering the phone. Representative Jones's office, how can I help you? And they give you a little script, a few sentences to say. So, this was sort of an activist message. This is Human Rights Campaign. These guys are really clever, and they had a contest to come up with the design for a baseball cap. I mean, a baseball cap is a very common thing that people wear around all the time. So somebody came up with, this was the winning design. These are kind of the rainbow flag colors, and this little blue rectangle with the equal sign is Human Rights Campaign's logo. So they sent out, here's the winning hat. I mean, they'd done a contest where they asked people to submit ideas for the design of the hat. Then they asked people to vote. They showed like the 4 best designs, and they said vote on which hat you think is which design you think is best. And then they selected this as the winning hat, and these guys think like commercial marketers. There are only 2,500 hats available, so donate to Human Rights Campaign now to get yours. And if you click on the link here, you go to a donation amount. And this is made to be friendly on mobile. I mean, this is what you see on your screen. It's really easy to read. The choices, you don't have to have fine thumb control to choose it. You have a choice here of making a single gift or becoming a regular monthly donor. You can scroll through here to choose these different options, 25, 50, 100, or you can indicate whatever size gift you want to give. And they just make it really simple to give. And they got a huge, and of course, if you made this donation, you got this cool hat. And if you're fashion forward, you could be the first person, in your neighborhood to be wearing this hat. So it's kind of cool. This is just examples of other messages. If you can't actually, you couldn't subscribe to Human Rights Campaign's text messages because those would only work on a US mobile network. But if you want to see some really good messaging, go to hrc.org and sign up for their emails, and you'll see some state-of-the-art fundraising emails. Whether your cause is LGBT or not, these guys do a great job, and they're super creative. So they have all kinds of other messages. Hey, Nicholas, you might not have realized that your membership is lapsed, but we sure have. We miss you. Blah blah blah. Will you reactivate your membership? Please renew. And if you click through, of course, you go to the donation form. Then they did a thing here. Quick question, Nicholas. How are you celebrating Pride? So this was, I think May was Pride month when there were a lot of Pride parades in, a lot of American cities. So, honestly, Human Rights Campaign doesn't really care that much about how you were celebrating it. This is an engagement device. I'm attending Pride celebrations in my hometown. I'm using my voice as an ally to stand up for the LGBTQ community. I'm taking blah, 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 and volunteering. So they, and when you click through this, it said, thank you so much for indicating you're doing something. Something else you can do to celebrate Pride is join the Human Rights Campaign. So, it's aimed at fundraising, and it's been incredibly successful. Human Rights Campaign raises a ton of money. And it's from a relatively small audience, right? I mean, it's LGBT people, and then, the millions of other people like me who are straight, but, support LGBT rights. So, takeaways. I mean, obviously you'll take away from this what you found most useful, if anything. I hope you found something. First is just, making sure you look good on mobile, so that whether people are looking at your web pages, at your emails, your text, it's easy to read and respond to on mobile. Something I should have talked about more was just making sure that your website looks good on a phone. Take a look when we get off this call, go to your website on your phone and see, is it easy to read? Is it easy to respond? Or is the website still set up to look good on a desktop or a laptop, but not look good on the small, narrow screen of a phone? You think of mobile as being almost the same now as digital and social, right? I mean, most social media is consumed on a phone, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, search, etc. It's on a phone, maps, it's all on a phone. So think, how do I make my material work on a phone? Keeping it simple, knowing that people who are looking at it are looking at it with just a few seconds between the other things they're doing. Figure out where are your existing and potential supporters. Can you reach them through Facebook? Can you reach them through Instagram? Can you get them to sign up for your email list? And then when you've got them, make it really easy and really fast for them to respond, whether you're asking them to sign a petition, donate money, come to an event, lobby Parliament, whatever you're doing. So I think when you've got a crisis, when people are, which from what I understand about Poland, it's an opportunity. Obviously, it has all of its own problems and damaging things it's doing, but it also means the audience that you care about, which might be small, that audience is going to be more passionate, and you have to show them how, if they support what you're doing, you can make a difference. And you don't want to overpromise, but when there's a I think it's supposed to be some Chinese proverb, but in crisis is opportunity. And when people are very concerned about what's going on, they're more likely to take action, whether it's go out in the streets, give money, go to a meeting, etc. And so this is a time you've got to take advantage of that in Poland. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you all today. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.